And Chetan Singh Solanki is also passed out from GSITS.
Okay. He's worked on this solar.
So he's more into social awareness and
Yes.
those types of things of the technology.
So, sir, can we start?
I am ready.
Yes, sir. So, good morning, Professor Kumar Appaiah, sir, from IIT Bombay, and all the participants. Today, we are here to listen and learn the convergence of radio over the fiber. As we know that the networking needs a large amount of the bandwidth, especially if we're talking about the Internet of Things and other applications, because we know that internet connectivity that can handle the IoT alongside other applications such as streaming, ultra high definition TV, high definition video conferencing, telehealth, and the cloud-based storage. The availability of the home wireless network is therefore crucial to spread to the IoT, and it's driving its immediate growth. We can take the another examples of the factory and warehouse, where the factory and warehouse will look to increase the efficiency by controlling the machine remotely, particularly in the potentially hazardous, noisy, and dangerous situation. On the other hand, we can see that where environmental conditions are very simple to harsh to allow wireless network to operate. Therefore, fiber optics cable provide the best means of handling this data and transmitting it around a facility. Apart from that, fiber sensor also plays very important role. So today, our speaker has a distinguished research and academic career in the fiber optics domain. Professor Kumar Appaiah received his BTech and MTech degree in electrical engineering from IIT Madras in 2008 and PhD degree in electrical and computer engineering from University of Texas at Austin, USA in 2013. From 2013 to 14, he was a senior engineer with the Qualcomm Technology, New Jersey. Since 2014, he has been in the Department of Electrical Engineering, IIT Bombay, where he is currently working as an associate professor. His research interest includes signal processing for the optical communication, multiplexing in wireless, and the fiber optics communication system. So on the behalf of Electronics and Communication Department of HGSITS Indore, we welcome Professor Kumar Appaiah, sir, and invite him to deliver his expert talk. Welcome, sir.
Thanks so much, Manish ji, and thanks to all the colleagues who have come. So it's unfortunate that I could not come in person, but hopefully there will be a future opportunity where I want to visit and to see you all. Like I was telling the colleagues, I have a very few outline slides, but I will just write and discuss and make it more interactive. So please do participate by asking questions and help out. Okay. Um, so the topic which I have been asked to speak about is radio over fiber for communication and IoT applications. Roughly, this is the topic which we are covering today. So overall, basically, I'm going to cover it in a couple of approaches. So we're going to discuss the basics of optical fiber systems and what modern optical fiber links involve. And then we'll briefly discuss radio over fiber and finally the convergence with IoT. So I'm going to actually split it into parts. So initially we have to just understand fibers, then radio over fiber, and then the IoT part. Some of these topics may be familiar to you. So if they are familiar, then please just bear with me. But if there are something which are not very familiar or which need more discussion, please do stop me at any time. No need to hold your questions till the end, and I will complete early so that there's enough time for discussion. Okay. So as you're aware, right, optical fiber communication is basically where it's of course it's transmission of data over an optical fiber. The key concept is that the modulated signal is guided along the axis of the fiber, and as you're aware, there's immense bandwidth and distance capabilities. and they're widely used, over short, long distance links, and recently data centers, and then also in many vehicles, like in cars and ships and everything. There's this drive and fly-by optics where they have replaced copper with fiber-based control and communication systems. The reason why this is attractive is because uh, driving, and so I mean in these vehicles, right, there are two major advantages with optical fibers have. They bring together the two advantages. One is that copper is heavy and more it causes some weight and all those things, while the optical fiber is much lighter. But more importantly, even while supporting higher data rates, they are also electromagnetic interference resistant. That EMI resistance is a major advantage for optical fiber systems. Okay, sorry. So when it comes to types of fibers, I'll spend a bit of time on this. Typically, you can classify them as single mode and multi-mode. So the fibers have, maybe I just draw and show you. Yeah. So typically, the fibers are of this form. So basically, they have this structure where there is basically a core. And a cladding. Okay, so this is basically like let's say that this full thing is about 125 microns. That is basically the core plus cladding. All of these are usually made of glass, and the key concept is that they have a refractive index of N1 here, refractive index of N2 here. So if you remember from your basic physics, right? Typically, whenever you have a surface where there's a refractive index difference, then you can actually apply Snell's law to actually characterize, the reflections and everything from the surface. So typically, whenever you launch any signal, let's say launch any signal into the fiber, right? Then it actually enters the fiber and then goes to this part and then gets reflected. Okay, and then that when it gets reflected, these laws apply and everything. Those are basically the Snell's law is basically tells you what you can expect when it comes to refraction as well. So if you remember Snell's law, then if it's like N1 sine theta 1 is equal to N2 sine theta 2 is basically what Snell's law says about the refraction. And typically N2 is less than N1, so that means there is a denser to rarer medium transmission. So without spending too much time there is basically a particular angle at which you have to launch, which guarantees that the full signal will be within. So there will basically be no refraction. Okay, if you launch at any angle which is which is larger than that angle, then there will be no refraction. All the rays will be completely captured. That condition is called total internal reflection. So this total internal reflection is the key principle by which optical fiber systems essentially work. Now, the slight the problem is that there are some slight problems with this picture. This is basically what is called the ray picture. Now, unfortunately, this ray picture is something which is a little risky. In the sense, not risky. It's like a little bit. There's some minor errors. The reason is because typically this core diameter, this core diameter is basically something like sometimes it's like 10 microns or something like that, while the actual wavelength of the light is sorry about this color. The wavelength of the light is sometimes around, let's say, 1.55 microns or something. Whenever the wavelength of the light roughly matches the aperture, whenever the wavelength of the light roughly matches the aperture, then you have to not use the ray picture, but you have to actually use Maxwell's equation. Okay, because that is the way to get to solve for the system more accurately. So if you really want to understand propagation through fibers, you have to solve basically the Maxwell's equation and get the wave equation. Okay, the wave equation is basically something like del square E, where E's electric field is equal to 0. Okay, and you'll have to solve it within this region with the boundary condition that the refractive index here is N1 and refractive index here is N2. Okay. Okay. So this is my very quick introduction to the structure of the fiber. There is just one minor catch about N1 and N2 I have to tell you. You know that typically for glass, N1 is about 1.5. Okay, that's the core diameter. There is N2, and typically they make N2 very close to N1 but slightly lesser, something like 1.49 or something. Now, they typically choose N1 and N2 to be very close to each other. Why is that the case? That is called the weakly guiding approximation. Sorry, weakly guiding condition rather. See, one question you may ask is, why do you need a core and a cladding? Why not just put air here, right? Because you can still enable reflection. It turns out that keeping N1 and N2 very close is very important to ensure high data rates. Okay, so this is basically the key thing. I will not go into this in very great detail, but this is basically the key concept that goes into the design of optical fibers. Okay. Now, when it comes to types of fiber, you typically classify them based on their core diameter. Like for example, this core diameter. The old fibers and several short distance fibers are typically multi-mode, where the core diameter is about 50 microns or more. These are called multi-mode fibers because if you solve this wave equation in those fibers, you will find that you will get many solutions to the wave equation. That is, to put it in a ray picture, you can have a ray propagating this way, you can have a ray propagating this way, you can have a ray propagating this way, and all those things. But this is allowed only when the number of the diameter of the fiber is very large. The diameter of the fiber is very small, say less than 10 microns. Then you can only support this particular fiber mode, the one that goes straight across. So that is the key difference between single mode and multi-mode fibers. Now, multi-mode fibers, however, even though it looks like they support multiple paths and modes, have this major issue that they support they support very small data rates. Now, why could that be the case? The reason is because I'm only drawing the core. When you launch into a multi-mode fiber, you will get a ray which goes this way, you get a ray which goes this way, you get a ray which goes this way, and so on. So you can see that the one which goes straight will go and will arrive at the photo receiver in smallest amount of time. Then a copy arrives here, a copy arrives here, a copy arrives here. So what essentially happens is that if you launch this at the receiver, you're going to get this, and then slight delayed copy, a slight delayed copy, a slight delayed copy, and you can sort of see that the net effect is that you're going to get it smeared. This is basically going to result in intersymbol interference, because you are essentially, your fiber is going to start acting like a low pass filter because it does this kind of averaging. This is called modal dispersion. This happens because the copies of the signal are arriving in delayed, and they get added up, and you'll end up getting a smeared essentially signal. And this is a problem because it significantly limits the data rate. Because suppose that you launch this and it becomes something like this. That means if you launch another bit here, that is going to get mixed up, and you're going to get huge bit errors when you try to decode them, huge bit errors when you try to get back the original. This is an issue. Okay, this is a key issue that prevents you from using multi-mode fibers for very high data rates. Okay, so what do you do? One way to get around this, I told you, and I skipped the details of that, is to make the core diameter much smaller. To make the core diameter much smaller, only this solution will go. That means you can eliminate modal dispersion. How? By reducing core diameter. This results in what is called single mode fiber. That is, those fibers whose core diameter is small enough only to allow one single stream to propagate is called a single mode fiber. So single mode fibers are the ones which are much more preferred and used. And if you now see, they support data with rates of 100 Gbps kilometer and things like that over very long length scales. And typically they are made of glass. Of course, multimode fibers can be plastic also. They're made of glass, but there is a price to pay. Price to pay is in terms of the alignment tolerance. So if you see the alignment tolerance, right, half micron versus much more than 3 micron. So if you now look at, for example, some of you may have this fiber-based, like set-top boxes or things like that at home. Typically, those are going to be multi-mode because you're going to hand connect them, and when you hand connect them, you want to get high data rates. So you want to not have to deal with tolerance and slight offsets and things like that. But when it comes to because at like over short distances at home, you can essentially get really high data rates, even with multi-mode fibers, and you get huge tolerances. But for single mode fibers, you can't do hand coupling. You cannot do hand coupling. You'll have to do things like basically there's complicated way to equip equipment which will basically align it to maximize the power transfer and things like that. See, because if you look at these optical fibers, right, if let's say this is the fiber and let's say this is let's say the laser signal, okay, it's not like if there's an offset of like some some 10%, then 90% of the signal goes through. The transmission of signal depends on this electromagnetic field coupling using overlap integrals. So if you match exactly, then you'll have maximum coupling. But even if you introduce slight offsets, then the amount which enters the fiber is going to be really small. So that causes a major issue. Okay, and this is basically the reason why alignment tolerances in single mode fibers are small. But to be very practical in nowadays, single mode fiber systems have now become commoditized. They're actually not that expensive. In fact, if you go for any of these SXP modules and things like that, right? They're actually very common, and 10G, 40G solutions are now not that expensive, and this is what you'll see most commonly when it comes to glass fibers. When it comes to these vehicles and other things like that, then you'll see plastic fibers, because there you care about, for example, if you bend the fiber too much, it'll break, and if you don't, you don't want glass fibers to break and things like that. So in that situation, you use plastic. One aside about the silica fibers I want to make. So in India, right, typically, the thing is that these fibers are laid underground. So it's like this, okay? And then this is like, say, the ground, and there's some, let's say there's a road, there are vehicles and things like that. And the fiber is typically laid underground. So this distance should ideally be about 2 feet, like 24 inches. But actually, my senior colleague was a consultant to RailTel. RailTel found that, and by the way, as you are aware, RailTel has lots of fibers which are near railway tracks, because these Indian Railways has lots of real estate in terms of tracks. So now, RailTel found that there's huge fiber breakage. So basically, there'll be breakage, like, because of certain pressures and vibrations and things like that. See, typically these fibers are going to not put bare. The fibers have a protective material, and then they basically bundle about 128 fibers together and then make it. But still, there's so much pressure from the top that there's some breakages. And the reason he found is because RailTel typically, see, you want to save costs and everything. RailTel typically used only 12 inches. Okay. And if you use only 12 inches, then the vibrations of the train and other things keep going down, and they start affecting the stability of the fiber, and start affecting it. In fact, the vibrations and other micro changes in the fiber cause the performance to diminish also. So this was something interesting. And so in India, right, because you all don't have much, see, you can't don't have right of way. It's very costly to close the road, dig deep, and redo the road, things like that. So they do this kind of thing quickly, and that's why earlier you had many fiber breakages. Of course, nowadays even the aspect of laying the fiber has now become very easy, and less expensive, so you get good performance. I mean, you can lay the fiber with 24 inches much more easy. Okay, this is about types of fibers. Okay, anyone want to ask any questions? Anyone? Anyone? Feel free to.
What is the approximate bandwidth supported by
Yeah,
this?
you please tell me your name so that I get to know you.
Sir, I'm Manish Panchal.
Yes, Manish ji.
Yes. Sir, how much amount of the bandwidth supported by this RailTel fiber? Because we are also getting connection from this RailTel fiber. Our college is NKN line. So one of the sister concern of NKN is the RailTel.
Yeah. So actually, the RailTel, like anyone else, uses the standard SMF fiber. There's some, I don't exactly know, there's some G dot, I forget the standard name, but typically these use the so-called C band of optical fibers. So basically they operate between, I think, 1540 to 1590 nanometers. Okay, so 1540 to 1590 nanometers, this is actually the bandwidth which they use. And as I will talk in a later slide, they use this thing called wavelength division multiplexing. So we really want to find out what this bandwidth is. Okay, so what you should do is you should basically find out these frequencies. You find out these frequencies and these wavelengths, and you can then you can basically multiply by the delta lambda and do it. But typically you can say that it is greater than 1 TP per second. And one more point I will make is that because this is a fiber, right? Because this is actually this is like a fiber. It's actually laid there. You can actually change the transmitter and receiver even later with the same fiber and still try to get higher data rates, because the fiber is what is the important limiting thing. So in some sense, so these fibers do support greater than 1 terabit per second as such.
Professor Kumar, I am Prakash Vihare. I have a small question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the question is, this is practically what happened in our college. So we have two links. The initial link came from BSNL. Later on, RailTel gave what is called this National Knowledge Network fiber.
Yes.
So what happened is, when these NKN people wanted to, dig the place and find out where those things are, they somehow used a small equipment which is on the ground, and they could see how the fiber is going underground.
Yeah.
So, so I was wondering, what do they do? In that fiber they transmit something else, or on the ground they were able to find out, approximately.
No, actually, I think what you're talking about, sir, is this. It could be an OTDR, okay, and it's very simple to understand. OTDR stands for optical time domain reflectometer or reflectometry, and this is actually a very easy reflectometer, I'd say. It's very easy, sir. So basically what happens is, whenever there's a fiber, and this is like say 100 kilometers, suppose there's a damage here, then typically whenever there's a damage, that means that the fiber got cut and this becomes a reflecting surface. So now what you can do is, suppose that you have access to the fiber port here. The people who have come to maintain, they will basically put an OTDR device. What an OTDR device does is, it sends a pulse in this direction, and then the pulse goes, some part goes, but at that point of damage, some part gets reflected and comes back. It can then use the time difference between the transmitted and reflected pulse in order to find out the exact distance at which the cut has occurred. So then all you need to do is, you can localize this to maybe within a few feet. So you need to dig, you can dig exactly at the point where the fault has occurred. Is it clear, sir?
Yes, this is clear. Now my question is slightly different. Maybe I'm sorry. So what I was saying is, there was a fiber of BSNL which was 2 feet below the ground.
Yes.
And these RailTel people had an equipment which they were using on the ground to find out, what is the path through which that fiber has been laid. So,
that.
Yeah, so I don't know what they did. But they had something, and they could sort of sense, that 2 meters below there is a fiber, but if they are going 2 feet, sorry, not 2 meters, 2 meters, maybe 1 feet, but they could sense that, it is crossing the road here and it is crossing the garden there.
So then the only thing I can think of is that, see, sir, the fiber actually has a core and the cladding and a protective sheath. The protective sheet typically has a slight bit of metal.
Now
And,
I understand. I think
yeah.
I think probably they were launching something onto this metal. I think now I
So
understand.
the metal is definitely, it's not much, but it is enough for you to explicitly be picked up, because this metal is also added for mechanical stability, because you don't want it to bend too much. So
Yes,
this
yes, yes.
metal thing could be what they can use to bend.
No, you are right. I think exactly they were doing that because what they did is to the end, which was at the another end,
Yeah.
they sort of connected something. So they must have put some small transmitter there,
Yeah.
such that the waves penetrate through the soil, and
Correct.
then now you have signal strength meter, which will because there was a common man who was just easily going through some small wheel with a equipment small, and then it was showing the needle was deflecting analog signal, and then he could send that. I
Actually,
think they use this metal thing. I mean, I think you're right.
definitely, the
Yeah.
protective thing has metal. That's the only place where metal is. And
Yeah.
as for common, the thing is that the because fibers are now so ubiquitous, debugging fibers and bringing equipment which will do this kind of fiber analysis or repair is now so common that you don't need much training to be able to use it. So you don't need to be some educated engineer to be able to do it. You can at least find out the problems very easily. So that's the
Yeah, you're right. Secondly, I was also surprised that maybe 12th class boy came to my home for installing this Geo fiber at my home.
yes,
And
yes.
he came with a connector. And you
Yes.
could quickly connect and align and found out that there is a 20 dB loss and all that. I was surprised that how come this 12th standard boy is able to do
So
that.
actually,
And even the connector was connected very easily. I mean,
so these connectors are now this clip-on type, and with clip-on type even the alignment is now very good. It's like almost pakka alignment. You
Yeah.
don't have much problems, and
And it's a multimode fiber, so actually that made the job easier for him, as you said.
exactly.
Thank you for
Sure.
and sorry for interruption.
No, not at all. Please, anyone else? Please, you want to ask me anything? Please go ahead.
Sir, this is Girish Soni.
Please go ahead.
So I just wanted to ask that in optical fiber communication, the carrier is has frequency range of terahertz.
Yeah.
So if the carrier frequency is terahertz, so what is the maximum? What can be the maximum frequency of the message signal?
Yeah.
Is there any relation between the carrier frequency and the maximum frequency of the message?
Yeah. So this is actually a very good question. So typically when we study communication, right, we then say, oh, if you look at this is spectrum and this is my FC, right, and my carrier frequency is, let's say, 1 gigahertz, then I can send so much bandwidth. All those things we study. It turns out that in this in the fiber case, the let me just fix this just a moment. It turns out in the fiber case, the carrier is actually, if you say 1.55 micron, and the reason I choose 1.55 micron is because that is the lowest loss window of the fiber. It's about 210 gigahertz. Sorry,
Yes.
210 terahertz. Sorry.
Terahertz, yes.
Terahertz. Now, the problem is actually, then ideally speaking, you should be able to send 200 tera, per second or something like that. But there are a couple of reasons why that is not possible. First is that if you look at it in terms of lambda, right? Let's say this is 1.55 micron. Then you can also see, because you know that I think nu into lambda is equal to C divided by refractive index. Okay. So this frequency, like F into lambda, is C by refractive index. So you can look at the bandwidth in terms of lambda also. Problem is that the loss in the fiber is lowest at this. After that, the losses increase. So one thing that prevents you from going at different frequency, different higher bandwidths is losses. So basically, there's a maybe I'll draw it in a different way. The frequency response essentially starts falling. That limits how much you can do. So that's why there is about maybe a 40 to 50 nanometer window around 1.55 microns, which translates to several, I think it travels several tens of terabits per second. That is the wavelength that you can use. Now, further, if there is some L band and other bands also where the loss is higher, but still you can try to push through some signal, which is why you get this. So they say some petabits per second and things like that, right? Technically, it is possible. The other problem is that this is actually purely in terms of fiber, okay? But let's ignore the fiber and let's say the fiber actually has a huge amount of bandwidth of several hundreds of terabits per second. The problem is your electronic equipment, right? Your electronic equipment may or may not be able to support that kind of thing, because essentially whenever you're going to send these kinds of things, there has to be some form of multiplexing. See, your final processing, getting the bits, everything has to be done on silicon. And you know that for example, our Pentium processor or AMD processors are now tens, or like maybe at the most they can go up to 5-6 gigahertz, something like that. So silicon can be used for processing of less than 10 gigahertz. So you can actually support data rates of some 20-30 Gbps or something using silicon. So you have to multiplex. So you have to do some WDM across all these. Now, when you do WDM, then you have gratings and all other components to support all these. So you get to those kinds of limitations also. So you are basically adding more and more complication. So typically, you know what they do, even though a single fiber can be used to support like petabits per second, it is cheaper to have, let's say, 1 TB per second, suppose BSNL wants another 1 TB per second. They should not change the equipment. You just put another fiber. That's it. That's the cheaper solution.
Okay.
Yeah. So electronics and all those things are now the limitation. Fiber has nearly huge bandwidth, but it is cheaper for you to just put more and more fibers, because it's just the fiber equipment, fiber all have become commoditized. Meaning maybe you and I may not be able to buy, but if you're like BSNL or Airtel, then it costs you very less to just keep adding many fiber links. That's it.
Okay, sir.
Sure.
So, okay, sir. Thank
Please
you,
go
sir.
ahead. Please go ahead. Other questions, folks? Okay. If then let me go to the next slide, and I can keep asking. Excuse me. Yeah. So in terms of mechanism of operation, I've already spoken about this. The laser signal, which is in the infrared range, and the reason I mentioned infrared range is because that is where the glass has the lowest loss window. See, basically, if you think about it, the loss is about 0.2 dB per kilometer. Okay, at 1.55 microns. Okay, and if you go to other, like let's say 1545, 1595 and things like that, it goes to about 0.4 dB per kilometer. Still not bad. But if you go to some other windows, especially for example, if you go to something, let's say between, there's a 700 to 900, 700 to 800 nanometers, right? There's huge losses of about greater than 10 dB per kilometer and things like that. So these things are not supportable. So greater than 10 dB per kilometer loss is not sustainable. So typically infrared, that is beyond let's say 800 nanometers. So they typically use 800 to 900 nanometers, and then 1100 to 1400, then 1450 to 1650. These are the wavelengths where it is used. And the other thing I mentioned is they are typically modulated externally. What that means is that if you basically, there are two approaches to modulation. One is, suppose you have a laser. Okay, I will not go into the laser aspects, but think of it this way: a laser is basically like an electronic device, where if you power the electronic device and you cause in each of the atoms of the device, you cause them to go to a higher level. When they fall, then the falling laser is actually in the correct wavelength regions, which causes coherent emission. Okay, light amplification by spontaneous emission of radiation. Okay, so basically laser is basically the typical workhorse. There are two approaches. Laser basically has a current. Laser is typically a current controlled device. So light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. I'm sorry, please correct what I said. So a current source is basically what drives the laser. And if you look at the laser output, right, then there is basically something like there's a knee, and after that the laser operates in the linear regime. So this is current and this is optical out. So what you can do is you can actually just keep swinging the laser current up and down. But the problem is that if you swing the laser current up and down, there are several issues. Okay, there's something called relaxation oscillations and many other issues. But the key thing is going from this kind of spontaneous emission to stimulated emission, which is when this huge power output occurs, takes bit of time. That is, if you basically try to swing the laser current to zero to high, the optical output will actually lag. So instead, you basically keep this fixed. This is called biasing the laser. You keep the laser power output fixed, but then you use an external modulator. So what is an external modulator? So an external modulator is basically, in this case, I will tell you what it is. This basically takes an external signal, like your data signal, electrical signal, and it superposes on this laser. This doesn't affect the laser, it only affects the laser output signal, and then this is modulated output. Now, how does this work? Typically, this external modulator is made using materials such as lithium niobate. These are special materials which have the property that they respond differently to light input. So, for example, if you put a signal which is high, add an electrical potential difference, the external modulators basically refractive index changes. If you remove it, it changes and things like that. You can use this effect to superpose your data onto the light. Okay, this completely avoids the problem of this relaxation oscillation and things like that affecting your speed. So for much higher data rates, you typically use external modulation. So you would have heard of this term called Mach-Zehnder. Okay, these are basically the modulators which are used in these kinds of optical systems. At the other end, you have photodetectors. Okay, photodetectors are the reverse of lasers. Basically, they are electronic devices where if optical light falls, then that causes the electron to get excited, and when electrons get excited, that changes the current that goes through them, and this photo current can basically be used to detect the received signal. So typically, there are photodetectors, and then there's electronic processing. That's what I mentioned when I say modulated externally. Okay, and yeah, as I mentioned, the fiber has core which guides along the axis, and then it has a cladding and everything like that. So that's basically what it is. The outside cladding prevents signal leakage using total internal reflection, and this is what allows transmission over long distances. This is the thing that I have covered. Okay, so what are the limitations? This also I mentioned, but I just try to emphasize some of the things a little more. So dispersion you can roughly define as the physical effects that cause different signal components to travel at different velocities, which causes pulse spreading. Okay, one of these I discussed, the modal dispersion, which is not present in single mode fibers. There are also other sources of dispersion. The other sources being the other sources are basically material dispersion, waveguide dispersion, polarization mode dispersion. Okay, so let me just go through these a little bit, okay, so that I just tell you. Modal dispersion is covered. We typically use single mode fibers. This doesn't affect us. Material dispersion is interesting. Okay, in the case of material dispersion, so what happens is that, see, we say that, this fiber has core refractive index N1 and cladding refractive index N2. Unfortunately, this N1 and N2 are also functions of lambda. Okay, they are not fixed, which means that if you actually launch into the fiber at certain wavelength, which the delay of that signal or the phase it accrues is dependent on N1. Now, if you launch into at another wavelength, the refractive index it sees is different, so the phase it accrues will also be different. So this is an issue. This is what material dispersion is. This also causes, so for example, whenever you launch any signal, you say laser, right? You say even if your laser has single frequency, the moment you modulate it, there is some data on it. Now this part gets delayed by this different amount, this part gets delayed by different amount, which causes pulse spreading. So this pulse spreading due to material dispersion, rather the refractive index changes, based on the wavelength, is what results in material dispersion. The second thing is waveguide dispersion. See, in the case of waveguide dispersion, right? See, when you solve Maxwell's equation, right? You solve based on the geometry. Solve based on the geometry of the fiber. Now, for a certain wavelength, you will get some certain rays which go through, okay, or some pattern which goes through. if the wave, and let's say that the energy distribution is roughly here, lot of energy here and things like that. If the wavelength increases, the energy distribution between the core and cladding can be different. Why? Because of the geometry of the fiber. Even if you ignore material dispersion, just because the wavelength of the signal that you are putting in changes, because the moment you change the modulator signal, it's not single wavelength. You change the wavelength, then how it fits into the fiber changes. So that's what causes waveguide dispersion. That is, the ratio of the power in the core to cladding is different based on the wavelength of the signal. That is why you get. That is why you end up getting waveguide dispersion. These things cannot be avoided. Actually, if you look carefully into a textbook like Kaiser or something like that, these things cannot be avoided, but they can be handled to a limited extent by using some approaches for dispersion compensation. So this is basically about material dispersion and waveguide dispersion. Finally, polarization mode dispersion. If you remember, electromagnetic waves can exist in multiple polarizations. That is, if you actually look at the cross section into the fiber, you could have the rays polarized, electric field polarized in this manner, and you could have the electric field polarized in this manner. Now, when you launch into the fiber, your energy couples into both of these. So, a part of it goes in the X polarization, another part goes in the Y polarization. These travel at different speeds. This also causes pulse spreading. So, these are basically some sources of dispersion in fibers. I'll just mention how these affect our ROF systems also in a brief way. Losses I mentioned, see that 0.2 dB per kilometer, I should have said per kilometer, depending on fiber material, wavelength and so on, but this very favorable compared to your coaxial cable, because coaxial cable problem is when you make the frequency very large, then it starts, in spite of your this protective dielectric region, it starts acting as an antenna, and the performance is very poor because of skin effect and things like that. So in that sense, fibers are very, very good in terms of loss. Okay, let me quickly talk about some modulation schemes. So typically the standard system nowadays, and for quite a long while, use incoherent modulation. The alternative new system use coherent modulation. Incoherent approach, typically you use this on-off keying. That is, you have this basically something like RZ or NRZ. Okay, so modulator basically superimposes the on-off bit pattern onto a laser, and the photodetector captures it. This is as simple as it gets. So you typically have something like 0, sorry, this is 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, let's say not this, 1, 0, something like that. This is like 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0. And at the receiver, you may, after photodetector, you may end up getting something like 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, something like this. Because of dispersion, it has a spread, but you can still make out. This is what you use when you use on-off keying. It is called non-return to 0. Okay. Because in the 1 it doesn't return to 0. In the case of RZ, which typically is not used, this is a 1, this is 0. So the RZ has some slight advantages when it comes to its properties with regard to DC value and things like that. But typically NRZ is what is used, and the photodetector and then the further electronic processing can recover this. The coherent approach, however, is something little interesting. This is what we study in the typical communication systems. So here you basically have a laser, and then you have phase modulator, amplitude potentially and phase modulator. And then after going through the fiber, then you have a coherent receiver. What does the coherent receiver do? It needs a copy of the laser. Because when you remember, in the coherent system, you need, if you send it FC, right, you need to basically, you need this FC to come back to baseband. So at the receiver, you need a laser. And in fact, implementing this system requires you to have a laser, and it needs what is called a coherent optical hybrid and all those kinds of things to bring you back to the baseband. The trouble is that when you use coherent systems, this laser, right, you need to have the laser matched exactly. Okay. Now, people who work on RF systems, so in RF, right, let's say that your carrier, like for example, if you use your GSM, all those things, or even Wi-Fi, your carrier is in the 1 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz range. Okay. let's say that there is a 1% offset. 1% offset, okay, in the carrier. 1% of 5 gigahertz is 50 megahertz or something. 50 megahertz of offset can be handled by a silicon-based PLL. Okay, but however, if you take laser, right, let's say 1.55 microns. Okay, 1.55 microns. Let me just do a simple calculation. So let's see. So 1 second. So 1.55 into 10. So 1.55 into 10 power minus 6. PE8 by 1.55 E minus 6. Yeah, it's like 193 terahertz. 193 terahertz. So 193 terahertz. What is about 1% of 193 terahertz? It's about 2 terahertz. There is no way that a silicon PLL, phase lock loop, can track a 2 terahertz error, because like I mentioned, a silicon circuit nowadays is able to handle up to several gigahertz. Okay. See, what does a PLL do? A PLL is essentially something which tracks the phase law and frequency, right? Now, to be able to lock onto something, you need to be in the region. A naive way to do a PLL is to basically search over all possible frequencies and find out which one matches and then track it. Unfortunately, when you have 2 terahertz, there is no way you can make a silicon-based phase lock loop which searches over all this frequency range. So, in fact, if you really want to implement a coherent system, there are now 2 approaches. One is the homodyne approach, where you send the laser also as part of the signal, and then you somehow derive the laser as part of the signal. This is similar to your amplitude modulation, where you send the laser signal also along with the data. For example, one approach could be to somehow send a weaker copy of the laser and try to do some processing to recover it. But if you really want to do heterodyne, the only way is you need to make a laser, let's say a semiconductor laser. You need to make 2 of those on the same day in the same fabrication process, and then operate both of them under the same temperature, pressure on both the ends. And you have to run an AC, track all those and everything. You have to run them in the same, under the same conditions. So that is typically the price you pay for coherent. But coherent is becoming very big in these really high-speed, long-distance communication links, because you can use PSK, PAM, QAM, and so on, and you get better receiver sensitivity and much higher data rates. Except that, like I mentioned, the price you pay is in terms of the high complexity that you encounter. So that is the approach. Coherent is becoming very significant, but at a limited level. In fact, if there are some companies, like I'll give you some examples. I think if you look at this company called Infinera, right? Infinera offers, and there's even this Nokia Telecom. These companies are actually offering solutions which are NEC as well. Sorry, NEC are actually offering long distance solutions which use coherent, but this is still the bulk. On-off based incoherent is still the bulk because of ease of implementation and lower cost. But this may actually come in the future for really high speed systems. So that is the coherent approach. So typically, whenever you deal with fiber systems, so the digital data can be modulated directly onto the laser signal, and then the data is typically framed into appropriate frame structures like SONET or say SDH. So see, the way our fiber systems were actually developed is that you were things like high-speed data streams, text, and all those things, right? You can multiplex all of these, and this SDH and SONET were typically imagined to be digital frames. So the way to think about it is this. So they basically have a frame structure where you basically divide it into several parts and keep putting bits 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, and basically you just populate the bits in the frame. And that's because everything is bits. These bits can be anything. They can represent your data, they can be text files, they can be voice calls, they can be videos, they can be anything. Okay. So, but typically the large deployment of optical fiber links and systems is focused on backbones for networks where your aim is to transmit bits. So bits is the key, word. Okay. Okay. I'll pause for questions. Any questions so far? Anybody? Go ahead, please.
Sir, this is Girish Soni again.
Please go ahead.
When we use direct modulation instead of external modulation,
Yeah.
because that is a cheaper option. So what?
Direct modulation.
Direct modulation,
Yeah.
directly modulating a laser.
Sure.
So
Tell me.
this restricts the bandwidth, the modulation bandwidth of the laser.
Okay.
So changing a laser source will help in getting better modulation bandwidth.
Okay, so let me actually tell you exactly the thing, and then we can just discuss. See, whenever you have a laser, right, then there's this power versus current. Okay, typically the power versus current curve looks like this. This is actually spontaneous emission, and then it becomes stimulated emissions, and there is a knee here. Okay, and when you use semiconductor lasers at 1.5 microns and things like that, the problem is if you want to do on off, right, you will go here to here, you'll keep cycling between these two. Okay, but the thing is when you take the current, let's say the current, right, if you take the current high instantly, okay, that is you take the current from here to here instantly, unfortunately when it goes from the spontaneous to stimulated emission, there is a slight lag. So the actual laser output could be something like this. Okay, this is basically why. See, there is always a delay for this population inversion and spontaneous emission to take place in the laser. So if you now want to take your current up and down quickly, your laser output will not go up as quickly. So your current may be doing this. I'll show you. Your current may be doing this, but the laser will end up doing okay. This means that your actually performance will be very poor. And if you increase your data rate, let's say that your current starts doing this, then unfortunately the laser will behave like this. Okay, you got what I'm saying?
Yes, fine.
Yes. So now, but what you say is true. If you use this VCSELs, right? VCSELs at 850 nanometer, there for those at 850 nanometer, this problem is not that severe. So VCSELs are usually directly modulated. There is no external modulation. The external modulation is typically done at 1.5-ish microns. Not for VCSELs. Yeah, you had a follow-up. Please continue first. Girishji?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, further questions? Yeah.
Professor Kumar Prakash here again.
Go ahead, please.
So for on-off you use NRZ, and then for this coherent, then one will use biphase type of line coding, or
so actually what
there is some other coding for fiber optic.
No. So they typically see for these the coherent is not very standardized. They use something like PSK, so something like QPSK. So what they do is they take the laser and then they introduce a pi/2 delay on one end, and then they basically change the then there's basically a phase modulator here. Okay, phase modulator does this, or they basically change the sign. So for example, you can actually change the sign here, and then you can get it. This is the way to make QPSK. Okay, so the same laser is basically taken, and just like the I and Q which we do in communication systems, you can actually just get the same thing. The only trouble is there are some minor issues with regard to phase, noise, and all those things which prevent you from doing it like very easily. But they use PSK, basically phase shift key. So it's that's the typical approach which is done.
And they send the carrier laser on some another fiber for commercial.
See, that's the thing. So currently, the solutions they don't talk much about it. But one way to do it, there are a couple of approaches. One way is out of all your fibers, you just send one for the laser and one for the data. That is a homodyne approach. Okay. The other approach is to use something like polarization multiplexing, where on polarization 1 you send signal, let's say X you send signal and Y you send data. That is the another approach which they do. So typically you have to find some way by which you have to send the laser. Of course, the third approach which these companies are claiming to do is they are claiming that they are basically able to use optical PLLs. But I am not very sure how they do the optical PLL. They are saying that they have an optical PLL which is able to track and give you a copy of the laser at the receiver.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, sure. Okay, other questions, folks? Okay, so let's go further. Yeah, so I think I'm doing okay on time. So yeah, the one other thing which you must know is wavelength division multiplexing. That is, like I was mentioning earlier, it is impossible for you to send data A at 1 terabit per second. So you break your data into smaller parts and then send, let's say, 20 GB per second or 40 GB per second streams on one wavelength, second wavelength, third wavelength, and so on. So for example, you can break it up into 40 wavelengths. This is called wavelength division multiplexing, and you typically use wavelength division multiplexing to send the data. And they usually have something called an arrayed waveguide grating. A waveguide grating is basically something which can combine wavelengths, and then a reverse grating can just split them. So it's like, I don't know if you've seen some, if you have the CDs and everything, right? You basically make this white light fall, then you'll see multiple colors coming out, right? That is basically what a grating is. So grating can combine light and split light into multiple wavelengths also. Well-designed gratings can support wavelength division multiplexing. Okay. Now let me come to the other part. So now when we come to radio systems, right? Typically radio systems support data rates of up to 10 Mbps nowadays. Of course, that's not strictly true. This 60 gigahertz and all those, and you know, the new 5G and all those kind of systems are able to support data rates of up to about several hundred or even GBs per second. Okay. And of course, there are trade-offs, but that's what we are dealing with. Now, there's effective propagation in the wireless medium. So, see, one question we should ask is, why are you using 1 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, 20 gigahertz? Why are these the carriers? It turns out that because in the in basically the in vacuum or in air, these typically travel for long distances. Okay. For example, if you try to use something like 1 megahertz, for example, if you look at AM and FM, right? I think AM uses I think about a megahertz, half a megahertz something. FM uses 90, 100, 110. These have some good properties for going really long distances at high powers. But even 1 gigahertz and things like that have very good properties. This is why, our, I think GSM uses, 900 megahertz, and then you have 1800. Then you have our Wi-Fi uses 2.4, I think 2.4, and our 5.1 gigahertz. These things are basically used. So they are very good for propagation in wireless medium. There's directional flexibility. These are omnidirectional, and you can, of course, there's no need to force them to be directional, but they are very good in terms of omnidirectional transmission. For example, when you look at your cell phone, right? Cell phone towers. Okay, let's say the cell phone tower. The cell phone tower actually typically can radiate omnidirectionally in all those regions. They don't do that. They typically sectorize into, let's say, 3 sectors. Okay, these are 3 sectors. Okay, 1, 2, 3. The reason they do the sectorization is because, as you're aware, spectrum is very costly, and to actually lease spectrum. By the way, all this wireless transmission in India is licensed, meaning you cannot transmit in any frequency without getting permission from the Department of Communication, right? That's why there's a spectrum auction and all that happen. So they typically sectorize, and they send some users here, they send some users here in the same frequency. You can reuse the frequency, because if you're only radiating here, these people are not affected by these people. So you can do this effective frequency reuse and send data. So they typically you do this, but within this region, right? They typically do not do any localization. Whether you're here or here or here, you will get the signal. So the directional flexibility plays a big role in these cellular systems and things like that. That is something which is really important. Okay. Next is our, of course, see in IoT. So typically the way that we have to think about it is that, you are using this to aggregate. You're using this to aggregate data. Like for example, let's say that you have a wide array of sensors or something like that, all of which are giving data. Each sensor is not typically giving much information, meaning it's not a high data rate. But in the future, what we're imagining is that you'll have these sensors everywhere. Like these will be like almost just sprayed across, and they'll all be sending some data. When you multiply by the number of sensors in the billions, right, then the amount of data that you have to support is starting to become big. For example, there are some interesting projects such as monitoring of lakes. Okay, so there is a lake which let's say on which you deploy sensors. You just throw those sensors. They're like one-time use sensors, and they communicate back to the you with some, let's say, pollution measurement or some such chemical measurement. Okay, the thing is that if you have 1 or 2 or 3 sensors, there's no problem. But suppose that you're actually monitoring from hundreds of sensors, you're sending data at various times, and you want to get all that data and send it through. That is the challenge that we're dealing with. So this is where we are trying to look at radio over fiber. Okay, so the concept is that we are directly transmitting RF signal over fiber. So let's say that there's an RF signal, the wireless signal, right? So you are, instead of sending data bits through the optical fiber, you send RF signal through the fiber, and you combine them and go through it. Why is this an advantage? The key thing that you have is you are now starting to use your optical fiber as an analog link. It's an analog link and not a digital link. We are actually sending the analog signal through the optical fiber. And where is the saving? I will just show you a picture eventually, but the key thing is, if you want to not use it as an analog link, you have to essentially decode the RF signal, convert it to bits, then modulate it, and then send it, and then after 4 convert it to bits again in the optical domain. You are completely short-circuiting that and just going to use RF signal on the fiber as an analog signal. So that is the key advantage which you are trying to exploit by doing this. So the key idea is conversion of wireless signals back to digital, and then by optical modulation has complexity and cost. See, over here, you need a wireless receiver, and then you need to perform conversion to bits, and then you need to re-encode and remodulate into an optical format, send it, and then you have to decode the bits here. Instead, let's just send the analog optical signal, and that reduces the complexity and cost significantly, and I'll discuss that. So fibers have large bandwidths. Why not send the analog wireless signal directly, right? And you spread the data across wavelengths and exploit the fiber as a wired medium for wireless signals. Essentially, you are making the fiber, which has a big fat bandwidth available, to send multiple pieces of data simultaneously in an analog fashion. That's the key difference. So if you look at the way radio over fiber works, typically, see, you multiplex signals over several wavelengths, okay, and you have these kinds of multiple wavelengths where you can send a digital signal on each, and wireless to digital to optical modulation reverse process is cumbersome. Okay, that's the key thing we are saying. Okay, this is basically a single digital stream. Instead, if you just send analog, I'm just depicting these radio signals as analog, as these arches, just squeeze these RF baseband signals directly into the fiber and multiplex them as analog signals. That's basically what we are aiming to do. And the thing is, at the receiver, you have a photodetector, and then you split these signals and process them, okay, process them using RF and microwave demodulators. So we don't need explicit optical bit conversion. We can just convert it to some analog electrical signal and perform the recovery using optical demodulators, okay, and enable some, you can do the same frequency division multiplexing and demodulation, all those things which are already being done in wireless. So it's almost like you are just taking the wireless signal and making it go further by passing it through an optical fiber. So that's in a sense all that you are trying to do, and you get immense savings in terms of optical digital modulation and demodulation. Why go for a costly solution of optical framing and modulation and demodulation? Why not just circumvent it? That is the key concept that we're going at. So the problem, now one issue that you have to deal with is this. See, it is very easy to say just do this, treat fiber as a pipe and everything like that. But there are actually very many practical implications of this which you have to be aware of. See, fiber dispersion affects RF signal much like this wireless fading. Okay, so in some sense, the fiber has a frequency response, right? Because you're essentially fiber is also going to cause some pulse spreading, because if the fiber has the dispersion, then you have to handle it in a very careful way. But of course, typically, if you are in the linear regime, then you can use this digital equalization techniques, which are typically done in these wireless systems, to recover the data. That is definitely the case. Now, this is an interesting one, non-linearity. So see, the fiber has non-linearity because, see, in a sense, it is a very small aperture, and within that small aperture, you are trying to send lots and lots of power. What happens is that there is a limitation, and there's this curve non-linearity and things like that. As you try to push more power through the fiber, this non-linearity starts affecting you in the sense that, see, what is linear? See, if you remember what LTI systems are, that means if you send down some frequency, output will be in that frequency. Unfortunately, this non-linearity causes frequency 1, frequency 2 to get mixed up. So you will actually start, mixing up these RF streams. There'll be mix up along these. That is very difficult because it cannot be corrected using linear processing. So that has to be taken care of. You can basically try to avoid it by limiting the amount of power. So in any case, by all said and done, these IoT signals are being sent, but they're not that much of bandwidth as, let's say, a 1 TB per second optical link. So you can try to reduce the amount of power in order to make sure that the non-linearities don't affect you, and try to do some post-processing, but it is very difficult to do. So you have to make sure that you operate the fiber in the linear regime so that you avoid this non-linear mixing of signals. Phase noise is an issue. See, phase noise is basically an issue because, see, I'll tell you what phase noise is. It manifests as. See, if you look at the laser is like a cos. Okay, but sometimes there are sudden jumps in phases. These jumps in phases can cause PSK detection to be a problem. And even when you do ROF, right, this kind of phase noise can cause your decoding process to go astray, and it could cause some kind of ailments. Now, unfortunately, that is something which you cannot avoid, but the way to do it is you add some error control coding or some redundancy, and the redundancy along with phase tracking can help you recover. So there are some standard techniques to do it. Frequency offsets are typically not that much of an issue. Of course, wavelength drifts are there, but it's not that much of an issue because you are essentially now going to track RF signals where you can put a PLL for each of those signals and track them. It's not going to affect you that badly when compared to, let's say, an optical coherent system. So that is one important advantage that you can get when doing this RF kind of. Okay. So next is, I'm almost done. We'll give you some time for discussion. So the trade-offs. Okay. See, typically, let's say that, we have this kind of, let's say, many sensors deployed. This is the picture which I kind of described to you. You are going to aggregate all of these into this is like a central place where you aggregate all of these, and you do a digital wireless reception, then optical modulation, and then you send it through single mode fiber, then do optical demodulation and recover the bits. This is the traditional approach. Okay, you aggregate lots of IoT streams, and then you want to transmit over a large distance. This is one way. Now, the issue is that the complexity of decoding, re-encoding over here makes this costly or complex operation. That is what makes this more expensive. Why don't we try to do this instead? Let's try to get rid of these, and instead we just do analog optical modulation and analog optical demod plus baseband processing for the RF signal. This is much simpler because we are using the fiber as an analog medium, directly feed the RF signal to the fiber, recover the electric signal at the receiver, and perform overall compensation. This reduces cost significantly. It's much less complex, and even though you are performing a little more processing at the receiver in terms of this baseband processing, the power consumption is also overall low. So this is the key kind of thing that we want to get at. So typically this is being looked at as an option in this 5G systems, and where you want to be able to send this data in an effective way and using analog modulation. But and it's coming up now, but it's actually becoming a very popular solution because in terms of actually you are in something, you're not adding any new equipment, you're actually removing equipment and just adding some simpler things on top. The key focus in terms of where research and development is happening is in this part. How do you process? How do you do this processing for these ailments? For example, I told you dispersion, non-linearity. That is where the key problems and questions are, and this is the interesting kind of work that is happening. But soon, I think we will see some practical deployments of these kinds of systems where they come in and they are basically going to be positioned as lower cost solutions for when compared to typical standard fiber deployments. So that is the way this is being looked at. Okay. I'll now pause for questions because I'm actually done with my slides. I'll pause for questions. Any questions, folks? Questions, please.
Sir, in slide number 17.
Yeah, let's go there.
Yes, you're told about that we will convert our wireless signal into the radio one,
Yeah.
into analog one. But sir, in the wireless, the problem of noise is so prominent.
Yeah.
So how will filter out before sending to the optical fiber? How will filter out the noise?
Okay. So see, this is a very good question. See, one thing you must remember is that when you have a wireless system, right? For example, you have, let's say, the standard cellular system. So always remember, the noise is always at the receiver. Okay, the noise is always at the receiver. In fact, if you if you can actually somehow just measure, like in your cell phones, if you go to the about and you can find out the receive power and things like that, noise is always at the receiver and as added. But what you say is correct. In the IoT example which I gave, where there are these sensors, there is actually you're going to have to convert it to an optical modulation, but then you are actually going to feed this signal into this. So there is an electrical to optical conversion. There is some noise which is going to be added here. But the way to do it is this. You have to ensure that, let's say that you have to ensure that you have something like a low noise amplifier or something over here, which doesn't do any processing and doesn't add much noise. So if you're going to perform any high amplification, then you're going to amplify the noise. But typically you're going to have a low noise amplifier here, and you'll basically add some filters to filter out the out of band noise. So because you're essentially going to do multiplexing, right? You're going to multiplex. So for this signal, you can add a filter which filters out noise in this area. For this, you can filter out noise in this area. So you typically add an LNA and some noise filters to do it. But there is no way to avoid this receiver noise from carrying over. Your only hope is that the noise added is low. See, actually what you're saying is a price you are paying. See, this question is a very valid one because I think in this picture to be clear. See, there is in this part, right? The noise is essentially eliminated here because I converted to bits. Then you are re-encoding, you're re-encoding and going further. Yes, that is correct. Here, the problem is that the noise is going to carry over till here. So you're going to get affected by the noise over here. The only way to somewhat avoid it is to just do LNA here and not do anything much. And try to do it here. But this is the price to pay. But again, like all engineering problems, this is a trade-off. I am willing to live with slightly more enhanced noise in this system for a much simpler and lower cost deployment. That's the way you should do it. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. So there's one more question.
Tell me, go ahead.
One more question. This whole conversion will take a lot of time from wireless to optical.
Yeah.
This wireless to optical. But in IoT, the latency should be minimum as much as possible.
Very good point. So see, actually the latency will be only slightly higher here because you're performing a digital decoding. In fact, in this particular situation, the latency will be smaller because there is no real digital processing. Everything is analog signal. You're directly just sending it. You're not like holding it anywhere. So if anything in ROF, this kind of problem, the latency will be lower. But having said that, the latency here is also not going to be that high that you're going to have trouble. But the latency of using an analog ROF approach is going to be definitely lower than this traditional decoding encoding part. So this is not going to be high. But are you are you saying that there will be more latency in this particular situation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Why do you think there will be more latency here?
No, sir, I am just saying from the IoT application point of view, because if I want to control some critical application,
Yeah.
and if suppose if some latency of 1 or 2 second is there, very possible that application may create some hazard at that point.
So see, this one will have more latency because you have a latency point here and here and here. Here the latency is only here because these parts are transparent. There is no, I'm not delaying anything. So this is like direct, this is like a direct pipe which is happening. Latency is happening only here. So this is actually better in those critical applications because you are essentially just performing one decoding. Here there is one decoding, encoding, another decoding. Here there is only one decoding. So in that sense, this is slightly better. Other question?
Any practical example that this system is implemented in IoT?
Yeah. So see, in IoT, actually, I will ask you to look at the references. It's okay because actually this topic you have chosen is quite new. It's being looked at only recently. See, in 5G cellular networks, right? They have this mesh network like configurations where let's say, see, actually it's like this. Let's say that you have a building, right? And you have fiber point of presence here. Typically, you want to get the fiber till the building. Unfortunately, you don't have the right of way. So what you can do is you can actually just put a transmitter and then receiver here, and then you can actually try to establish this link using a wireless approach. This actually is not an example of the RF approach because this happens digitally. But if it's a sensing application, then this link can be made completely analog, and the you have some sensing things here. You can aggregate those and send it over analog to the fiber point of presence, and from the fiber point of presence, it can go as an analog signal. So think of it this way. Let's say that you're measuring certain. Let's say this is for fire or some temperature measurement within various parts of the building. You're aggregating all of those. Because of latency issues, what you're doing is you're essentially wirelessly transmitting the data to the fiber point of presence, and here you're using analog modulation to send it to the central location where they check for fire alarms and things like that. There the processing can be happening much faster because of the fact that this is an analog system as opposed to a digital. So that is one approach. But to be very frank, practical deployments, currently there are very few, and you can just look at these references for some suggested applications, but I don't know of any commercial deployment. Like for example, there's no product. For example, if you ask me, is there a 1 terabit per second optical product? Yes, there are many. If you ask me, is there some, some 100 Mbps wireless product? Yes, there are some standards and product. Here, there is no such standard product yet that is still widely accepted. That is the limitation. But it will come, I would say, very soon. There's no reason why it won't come because the technology and engineering seem favorable. Other questions?
Good morning, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Please tell me your name.
Sir, will it be possible to achieve a high data rate or what are the typical values of the data rates which are achieved?
Yeah, I'll tell you, but you should tell me your name, ma'am.
Yeah.
Your
Pardon?
Name. Maybe I am able to get across. Okay.
My name. Okay. I couldn't get it, sir. I'm Dr. Anjula Yadav. I'm Associate Professor in the Department of Electronics and Telecommunication, SGS ITS.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am. Thanks. So actually, see, the data rates which you are going to support is going to be dependent on the bandwidth of the system. In the case of this fiber, right, you are if you use the C band, right, the C band can support up to tens or up to 100 terabits per second. The same thing can be done by doing appropriate multiplexing within. So you do a wavelength division multiplexing, and within the wavelength division multiplexing, you try to attach many small signals. So you can get really high data rates. But the complexity is going to be here. The complexity is going to be when I am said analog optical modulation, you're going to have analog optical modulation for so many radio signals. That is where the complexity will be. So as such, there is no limitation in terms of the data rate. The limitation is only going to be in terms of the amount of a number of, let's say, signals, number of signals that you're planning to multiplex within. So that is where the limitation will be. You can send several hundreds of terabits per second through the fiber, even using ROF. The other thing is, it is also dependent on the fiber length. If you make the fiber really long, then you cannot avoid non-linearities, you cannot avoid losses, you cannot avoid these things. So if your fiber length is short, then you can send much more data. Fiber length is long, then the data rate is limited because of losses, non-linearities, and other kind of frequency response issues. That is one limitation.
So can this WDM can also be achieved, sir, in analog or analog?
You should WDM. Whatever I am saying is in addition to WDM. So see, if you look at the way I'm looking at they look at it, they say you take WDM, put RF signal. You take another wavelength, put mini RF signal. Take another, put RF signal. So this is happening along with WDM. So you get the benefits of WDM without going digital. That's the key. That's the way to think about it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Other
Sir,
questions?
I'm
folks?
Nisha.
Yeah.
Sir, I have doubt from dispersion shifted fiber.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any particular preference of using these non-zero dispersion
So,
shifted
ma'am,
fiber in
dispersion
WDM
shifted
technique?
fibers are basically dispersion shifted fibers, right? Have this minor issue that, see, the way they shift dispersion is by making material changes. Okay. And they actually claim to offer better frequency response, but the price you pay is there's more non-linearities. So if you look at dispersion shifted fibers, if you use, they are not typically used for DWDM because dispersion shifted fibers often have non-linearity related issues which prevent you from using them for WDM very easily. Having said that, dispersion shifted fibers can be used in order for you to reduce the complexity of the receiver because you don't need much of dispersion compensation at the receiver. You see, electronic dispersion compensation can be eliminated. That is the key. But most of today's systems use this, they don't use dispersion shifted fibers because of this non-linearity related issue. That's the key thing.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Other questions, folks? So these slides I will share with.
I'm Prakash here again. I'm a really quick comment. There is no question now. Listening to your lecture actually reminded me of Professor Giridhar of Chennai.
Yes,
I
yes.
think sometime he might have taught you. Did he teach you optical fiber or something?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yes.
very nicely explained and answered all the questions.
Yes.
So I must congratulate you for that.
Thanks.
The typical, I mean, as I said, it's only a comment, but still I just came down to this, for the last thing that you were saying. So basically dispersion shifted fiber can be used only if you have high switching rate electronics. So maybe it could be in future.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
as you said, you cannot use multiplexing there. So if in future the electronics become faster, probably this may find some applications.
No, definitely. There are certain standards also, sir. So you are definitely correct.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Thank you very much. Congratulations once again.
So, Manish ji, I will share my slides. I have nothing here is private. So I will share my slides with you. You can go through them. And I also wanted to mention that I am also available for follow-up questions and everything if you want. So you can share the contact details also with colleagues, and I'm happy to discuss with them.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Yes.
Definitely, sir.
Yes.
So do you come to Indore sometime, Kumar, to IIT Indore or something?
I will. No, I mean I have not come, but I don't mind visiting. So I will definitely come.
No, Manish Srivastava and Shekhar Sharma will arrange sometime once the things get smoothened out. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, all of you. We at SDS IITs are thankful to Sir, respected Kumar Sir, for delivering such a wonderful lecture. I think by far it was the most interactive session of the FDP. Sir started with very basic concepts of optical fibers from core and cladding and brought us all to radio over fiber concepts. Once again, I thank Sir, and I hope we get to hear Sir in future also. Thank you, Sir.
I really enjoyed talking with all of you, and I hope to interact with you and even visit you as well as soon as times become better. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir. Once again,